All right, I think everything's working. So we're broadcasting to you semi live from Washington, D.C., just a 5 mile walk from the embassy to Uzbekistan. So if things go pear shaped, we can always get to Uzbekistan. It was interesting coming into this city last night. You know, it's if you've never been to Washington, it's an impressive place. You know, it really is. You drive in and you see the beautiful mall, you see the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument and the Capitol kind of stretched out uh, across the city. It really is a nice place, and you sort of have that sense, especially if you live in California where nothing seems real. You think like, oh yeah, all this really there actually was a Lincoln and there actually was a Washington. All this stuff that we're yelling and arguing about actually had a source and people who took it seriously. It reminded me of it's just a beautiful view. And it reminded me of an old 19th century hymn that has the line, "Every prospect pleases, and only man is vile." In other words, the view is great, but people stink, you know, and which in turn reminded me, that line reminded me of the opening of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. If you remember, Jimmy Stewart is this kind of yokel, a kind of Boy Scout who gets through a series of ridiculous events, gets swept up into becoming a senator. And he's a real believer in all the American ideals. And he goes to Washington. There's this long montage of him looking at all the monuments, just so inspired by the words there and by the face of Abraham Lincoln and the people coming to visit the monuments. And then, of course, for the rest of the picture, he discovers that Washington is a sewer of corruption and thieves and criminals. And so, you know, every prospect pleases and only man is vile. And that's it's kind of like represents both of those works of art kind of represent the distance between principle and humanity. The monuments kind of represent the principles that we stand for, and the people here, as we know, suck and are are a swamp. But you know, I always think when I'm talking about the government, we shouldn't judge people in government too harshly, because when you judge people for abandoning their principles too harshly, what you really are is you're judging yourself too well. Because it's easy to have principles sitting here behind a microphone. It's easy to have principles on your couch. It's not easy when your career depends on it, when your job depends on it, when your love life or your family depends on it. And that's what you're watching with these guys. These guys are fighting, these political guys are fighting for their lives every day. And one of the things that always is so shocking about Donald Trump is that he's obviously not a man of principle, aside from the principle of winning, and he doesn't pretend to be. And that's the real question with Donald Trump, is not whether, if not pretending to have principles, does that make him worse than everybody else in Washington, or does it actually make him more honest than everybody else in Washington? As we're watching this FBI scandal unfold, and it's getting worse by the day, it really is, and watching the Democrats scramble to cover it up and the press scramble to cover it up, I really think that maybe Donald Trump is just kind of doesn't wear the mask of Washington. And I don't know if that makes him better or worse or just scary. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.